Why do you suggest to sit with the pain, but not to sit through the restless thoughts, get to know them, change attitude towards them? Because this is a concentration retreat. So we're trying to develop concentration on this occasion. So the thing is that the restless thoughts, those aren't just things that appear out of the blue and just have their own life. They're things that we're doing. So we're actually actively engaging in thinking. So it is true that every now and then your mind will just produce a bit of noise, just because that's the nature of minds. And again, that tends to be the product of having put a bunch of noise into your mind in the past. But if you don't participate in that mental noise, then it dies out almost immediately. So it's just like a little flash that comes and goes. A little burst of static. So that's not a problem. And thus it's not something that we really need to worry about. So when I'm talking about restless thoughts, that's not like you're being attacked by restless thoughts from some like outside monster that throws restless thoughts at you. You are creating those thoughts. You are engaging in that thinking process. And so as long as you're engaging in the thinking process, you are not concentrating on your meditation object. So there is a place for investigating the thinking process, but it is not during the cultivation of concentration practice. Yeah, the point of learning to sit with the pain is because pain is one of the number one reasons why we break our posture. And when we break our posture, that has a tendency to disrupt our development of concentration. Again, if you want strong concentration, sit absolutely still. Don't move an inch. If you don't want strong concentration, you can move as much as you like. That's fine too. You just won't get any concentration. Next question. I saw a video of a monk in Theravadan robes slap a lady. He proceeded to get beaten by a man and subsequently retaliated after some time of passivity. What's the point of this story exactly?
It's a preamble.
This brought to mind the story of Moggallana's past life as Maharadusi. Question. When observing aversive stimuli, how do we cultivate compassion free from unwholesome critical judgments, but with enough discernment to label and constructively criticize the aforementioned experience? I'm assuming that's related to the thing of watching a video of a monk slap a lady and then get beaten up. Yeah, why don't you go with this one?
For me, the key word is aversive stimuli. So this is a subtle distinction. What's aversive? The stimuli is not aversive. That's what Bhante was talking about earlier. Stimuli is just stimuli. You see something in the world. Aversive is something that we do. We say that this is bad. We say that they're bad. We say that this is wrong. We say that it shouldn't happen this way. Somebody who's cultivated their mind, who's abandoned aversion, they don't see stimuli in this way. Even if somebody is doing something immoral, their response is compassion. They see, oh, this poor being, this action that they're doing is going to compound their suffering. They've lost control of themselves. They're digging themselves a pit, and it'll be hard to get out of it. That's a compassionate response. So if we want to get a handle on how we can see things in the world and not be shaken by it, it's really loving kindness. It's really compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. That turns all stimuli into just suffering, normal samsara. can see anything on YouTube these days.
Facts.
So I'm just curious, like, did you put into the search bar, like, monk slaps lady gets beaten up? Is that
I'm just scrolling on Facebook, it was coming through.
Yeah, anyway, what he said. Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember that when people do unwholesome deeds, they're hurting themselves. So when you see somebody else do something unwholesome, then the automatic reaction is the same way, like we have the cat here, and lately the cat has been having an allergic reaction, so he's scratching himself till he's actually injuring himself. So you don't be like, bad cat, you're so evil. No, it's just like, oh, that's so sad, he's hurting himself. So that's the same reaction you want to have when you see somebody do something evil. It's just like, oh, that's so sad, they're hurting themselves. Next question. It appears that the so-called unreadable gibberish word, i.e. focus in this case, can happily coexist with various thoughts in my head. I tried changing the word, but to no avail. Other suggestions? Stay focused. Keep your attention focused on your body. While particularly, again, I'm recommending focusing on your hands as your centerpiece. While repeating the word. You can try using a longer phrase. Sometimes that helps. If you find using a single short word is not enough, you can try using a longer phrase and see if that helps. So actually, when I first had success using a mantra, I was using something a bit longer. As Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. So homage to Shakyamuni Buddha. I was using something a bit longer than just focus. So you can try some different things and see what works. But the truth is that just as you keep focusing your mind on your body, then eventually that's what becomes the dominant direction of the mind. It can take some time. So the mantra, again, is mainly just a way of helping to reduce or hopefully eliminate the unnecessary thinking that we engage in. So if you're noticing any reduction in thinking as a result of using this mantra, then it's doing its thing. It's not necessarily going to totally eliminate unnecessary thinking, but hopefully it'll help reduce unnecessary thinking. So the mantra, and also the mantra is not meant to be used for the entire time. If you get to a point where the mind is very quiet most of the time, then you can stop using the mantra and just focus on your body, just focus on your hands. And in fact, what you'll notice is that after you get rid of the bulk of the thinking with the mantra, then the mantra itself starts to be the primary source of mental disturbance, of mental agitation. And then that's when you stop the mantra, because at that point it's preventing you from going farther. So the mantra is useful in the beginning as a way of quieting down some of your thinking. But then after it's done its work, then you drop the mantra as well and you just stay with your body. So you can make that switch whenever it feels right to you. So if you feel like your mind is quiet enough at this point in the retreat, go ahead and stop and drop the mantra. If you feel like your mind is still extremely noisy, I would recommend keeping with the mantra for at least another day or so. And yeah, you can try something longer, but what I don't recommend is I don't recommend bouncing around a lot. Like, focus, 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 okay, that sucks. Peace, 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 I don't like that either, it sounds too hippie. Tranquility, 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 no, that's too pedantic. May everyone be happy, may everyone be happy, no, I don't like that either. Like, if you just keep bouncing around, then that's not going to help either. That's also just going to stir up the mind. So, at the very least, if you are going to try a different mantra, pick something at the start of the meditation period and keep with it for the whole time and see what happens. Because, I mean, it really doesn't make that much difference what the content of the mantra is. Though again, optimally it's something that relates to our practice, like focus or peace or tranquility. It's more just the constant repetition in the mind. It's forcing the mind to, basically it's acknowledging, okay, I'm addicted to thinking, so I'm just going to make my thinking be predictable and repetitive. I'm going to take control of that. So it's like I'm addicted to thinking, I can't make myself stop thinking cold turkey. So instead I'm going to switch to consciously controlled, specifically directed thinking. And we do that until we get control of the thinking process. Then we can stop. So that's the point of the mantra. What is your view on Soka Gakkai? Do they share similarities with the approach to Buddhism taught here, or do they represent something considerably different? So what comes to mind is there was a Western Buddhist who went to a Tibetan Lama, a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, and asked, there's so many different kinds of Buddhism, how can I know which path is the right path? And the Lama answered, any path which teaches the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path is the right path. So that's a very good blanket way of judging whether or not something is actually Buddhism. Are they teaching the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path? That's a pretty straightforward way of judging. I mean, personally, I don't know an enormous amount about Soka Gakkai except what I've read on Wikipedia. And of course, Wikipedia knows everything. So that means I know everything there is to know about Soka Gakkai. It's quite a bit different from the forms of Buddhism that I'm trained in and that I'm more familiar with. And that, so I'm predominantly familiar with the contemplative practices of Buddhism, the meditative schools of Buddhism. And from what I can tell, Soka Gakkai is more faith-based, and their primary practice is the repetition of a particular mantra, generally vocal repetition. So I'm not really familiar with that kind of practice. I'd recommend look into it and see if they're actually teaching and practicing the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. That'd be the way to find out. Next question. Let's see. Focusing on pain ameliorates it. That's a fancy word. But seems to produce lots of restlessness and anxiety. I then try returning to the object to calm the mind, but then the aversion to pain returns, and I'm left with sloth, ill will, doubt, you name it. Is there a superior alternative to approaching this issue? Well, basically, when you have pain, you have two options. Either you focus on the pain in order to, again, overcome your aversion towards it, or you focus so intently on your meditation object that you just don't have space in your mind to create pain. Those are two options. So, focusing on the pain is more the path of insight meditation, actually, of investigating the mind, investigating how we're creating pain and learning how to stop. So it does require a strong degree of concentration, but it more resembles insight practice. Whereas just focusing completely on your meditation object to the point where the pain is excluded, that's more in the domain of a pure concentration practice. So those are your two options. You can't really find an intermediary between the two, in my experience. You have to do one or the other. So, I mean, what's worked for me is when I feel pain, I focus on it until I make that switch. And I've done this often enough that I can make the switch very quickly. Like when I start feeling pain, I just pay attention to it for a few seconds and it's gone. It's really not, it doesn't last. But again, that takes training. You have to train your mind to be able to quickly deal with pain in that way. The other option, again, is that you just focus on your object of concentration and just keep your mind on it. Like, don't let your mind go to the pain. So you're still aware of the sensations in the periphery of your awareness, but the bulk of your attention just stays on your hands. So your attention's on your hands and you're aware of the pain in your knee, but you're aware of it the same way that you're aware of the wind in the trees and the people across the street and the car going by. It's there, but it doesn't bother you. It doesn't have the power to affect you. So you just keep your attention focused on your hands, and the pain doesn't matter. And when you do that as well, then it also ceases to be pain, because once again, pain is a mental process. It's something that we do. So when you stay completely focused on your meditation object, then you're not doing pain anymore. You're not making pain anymore. Next question. What's that? Do you want to do this one? Bonus points for using tiny scraps of paper.
And a smiley face.
Yeah.
Tahn, Pamutto, and Suddhaso, please explain the benefit of Anjali Mudra. It's a very ancient way of showing respect. If you get into analyzing it, yeah, you're not doing anything else with your hands, and you're bringing them, by your heart. I mean, it's a very nice thing. And in medieval Europe, the knights would hold their hand up. This became a salute. It said, I don't have my hand on my weapon. I'm probably not going to be able to kill you quickly. And that became, hi. But in Asia, this has always been a sign that, of communion, sort of like namaste in India. So respect is really, it's a condition which makes learning possible. It's worth cultivating. Yeah. And it just feels good. I mean, have you ever done this? Maybe it's just you can't, it just makes you smile.
Thank you.
Yeah, like, see smiling.
Okay, next question. One, I have practiced meditation for a while, but I feel like it doesn't go so far. I can meditate longer, but it still doesn't get into advanced levels as I expect. What is a technique that I can go into the advanced level in the fastest way? Well, first off, there's a couple things to think about. First, what are you doing when you're not meditating? This is extremely important. So it's not just about how much you meditate and how often you meditate. It's about two things. One, what are you doing while you meditate? And two, what are you doing while you're not meditating? So you could sit still for hours and hours and hours every day, and you would not get one step closer to enlightenment. There's a lovely quote from this, by the way. Somebody went to Ajahn Chah and asked Ajahn Chah, is it necessary for me to sit still for long periods of time when I meditate? Like if I sit for longer periods of time, will that improve my practice? And Ajahn Chah said, look at chickens. Chickens sit still for hours and hours and hours every day, but you don't see any enlightened chickens running around. So again, the point of this is that it's not just about how many hours you sit every day. It's about what you're doing with your mind, whether you're sitting or not. So, are you cultivating right effort? Every waking moment. Every waking moment, are you constantly working to eliminate harmful tendencies of mind? Like anger, greed, obsession, resentment, daydreaming, spaciness, and so on? And are you actively cultivating positive mind states? Loving kindness, compassion, mindfulness, equanimity, concentration. Are you developing right perspective? Are you developing an accurate understanding of karma, an accurate understanding of the Four Noble Truths? And are you looking for it in your life? So Buddhist ethics is actually really straightforward. It's basically the golden rule. Whatever you do will come back to you. So if you hurt people, you will be harmed. If you help people, you will be helped. Very simple. So of course we have a number of specific examples, like not killing, not stealing, not cheating on your partner, not telling lies, not using intoxicants. So we have some specific examples, and there's some more that I could go into. But the basic principle is very simple. Don't harm anyone. Because whatever you do will come back to you. Considering, what are you doing in every waking moment? Whether you're meditating or not. So it does help. That said, it does help to meditate for longer periods of time. So if you meditate every day for 5 minutes, that's better than not meditating at all. But it's very difficult to get much concentration or much insight in 5 minutes. Half an hour, I would say, is a realistic bare minimum in order to make genuine progress. Again, 5 minutes is better than none. If you think, I don't have enough time to do half an hour, then don't do half an hour, do 20 minutes or 10 minutes even. So doing some meditation every day is better than none. But in my opinion, less than half an hour, it's difficult to get much genuine progress. So yeah, to some extent, more is better. As far as techniques, there's a lot of different meditation techniques in Buddhism, and broadly speaking, we divide them into 2 or 3 categories. So we have techniques for developing concentration, techniques for developing insight, and we also have techniques which develop both concentration and insight together. But within each of those categories, you'll find many, many different techniques, and it doesn't actually make a huge difference which technique you use. So whether you focus on the body, or you focus on your breathing, or you focus on an abstraction of a color or light, or whether you focus on sound, it's all concentration meditation, whatever you call it. And in insight practice, again, there's many ways of doing insight practice. So whether it's perception of impermanence, or the perception of not-self, or the 4 elements meditation, or there's many different ways of doing it. So you explore the different options, and you use the techniques that seem to work best for you. So to some extent, it's a practice of self-experimentation. Experiment on your own mind, and see what meditation techniques work best for you. So many people are only familiar with 1 or 2 meditation techniques. So they think that's what they have to do. Like everybody talks about breath meditation, and that's fine if it works for you. But there's an astoundingly high number of people who it just doesn't work very well for. So again, you go to most meditation teachers and they'll tell you focus on your breathing. But that might not work well for you. So try something different. So I don't know, whoever wrote this, I don't know you personally well enough to tell you what techniques I think will work the best for you. What I can do is I can give a number of different options and encourage you to try out some different options and see what works for you. If you're staying for the whole retreat, then on Monday we'll start doing personal discussion, and at that time then we can have a personal discussion about what you're doing and what might help you advance. Next question. Sometimes I saw a picture when I meditated. It came up by itself. I didn't imagine it. I've heard that it can be vision or imagination. How can I tell the difference between them? How can I meditate into a deeper level that I can have clearer vision? So whether it's vision or whether it's imagination doesn't matter, because that's not the purpose of our meditation practice. So we don't meditate in order to have visions. We meditate in order to attain enlightenment. We meditate in order to understand the root cause of suffering and to eliminate it. That's why we meditate. We meditate in order to develop understanding of our own mind and to eliminate our habits of self-torture, our habits of self-torment. But yeah, sometimes when you meditate, you'll see all kinds of interesting pictures appearing before your eyes, even as your eyes are closed. You can even see whole scenes playing out. You might hear sounds which may or may not actually be around you. You might see lights or colors. You might smell things which aren't theoretically an objective reality, if there is such a thing, which I'm not convinced of. And that's just what happens when the mind gets concentrated. Sometimes it starts to produce interesting sensory experiences. Pay no attention. Stay focused on your meditation object. Don't get distracted. This is just more ways that the mind tries to wriggle away from meditating. It's more ways that the mind tries to pull away from the practice. So don't be fooled. Don't fall into it. It might be real, actual paranormal visions that you're having, but who cares? That's not going to bring you to enlightenment. Or it might just be your imagination running wild, and that definitely will not lead you to enlightenment. So whether it's real or not, don't worry about it. Stay focused on your meditation object. Don't get distracted. Any comments?
Yeah, to the question of what is the path of cultivating clarity of vision? Like if you want to see things more clearly in your mind, what would you do to go about that? This is the path to having a more clear mind. Buddha was once asked by a Brahmin who was trying to learn the Vedantic scriptures. Why is it sometimes he could remember the passages and sometimes he couldn't? And the Buddha said, well, there's only the 5 hindrances. They are what obscure the mind, they're what cloud the mind, they're what make us forget things and not have access to things we want to have access to. If you follow this path, if you learn to concentrate your mind, you'll have the ability to decide. You'll have the clarity. You'll be able to see what it is you're thinking as you're thinking it. So give it a try.
The Buddha also said, when one is concentrated, one knows and sees things as they really are. So if you want clarity of vision, then practice concentration meditation. Next question. While focusing on my hands this morning, I started feeling pain and then pretty unpleasant vibrations throughout my body. I didn't move, but gradually started feeling nauseated, hot, and cold at different times. Eventually, I was feeling too dizzy and nauseated and had to stop. I've never experienced anything quite like this before. What to make of it? Maybe some energy release or some type of piti? Just curious, mostly. It's not piti. So piti is rapture. Piti is extremely powerful physical euphoria. So this is not piti, because piti is extremely pleasant. It's not unpleasant at all. What I would recommend in this case actually is keep your attention on the meditation object, but just relax a little bit. Pull back a little bit. So what sometimes happens when we're meditating is we get really intent on the object. And when we're really intent on the object, then even if we're not aware of it, we're tensing up our body. And this can produce various physical reactions in the body. And also that mental state of straining tends to also create psychosomatic responses in the body. And also it's an unpleasant mental state in the first place. So in my experience, most people aren't trying hard enough in their practice, and that's why they're not getting good results or any results. But some people are trying too hard, and that can produce unpleasant side effects like what's described here. So what I'd recommend is if this happens, relax a little bit. Not to the point of losing your focus. So still keep your attention centered on your hands, but just relax a little bit. Stop trying quite so hard and see if that helps. Do you have any comments on this?
Drink plenty of water, and during the breaks, try lying down for maybe just 5 minutes. Just without any intent, without any straining on the meditation object, just give your muscles a chance to relax.
Actually, that's an extremely important point. So during meditation retreats, where we're doing an enormous amount of meditation all day long, it's easy to forget to drink enough water. So yeah, definitely make sure you're drinking enough water. Next question. Dear Bhante, are the flowers real? Yes, they are real. Orchids look suspiciously fake, but these are in fact real orchids. They were just donated to us by a very nice lady from Thailand who came here as part of a group of visiting monks just a few days ago.
I mean, that's what's on your mind. Do you analyze that? It's either really good, like, yeah, oh, I got this meditation thing, but it is real, or it's maybe back to the object.
He does have a point here. So theoretically, you're supposed to be meditating, and if you're thinking, you're supposed to be thinking about Buddhism, not about fake flowers. I would also encourage that we use the question box for Buddhist questions, rather than for botany. For one thing, I'm not a botanist or a gardener, so I'm unlikely to have anything useful to say. The recollection of stilling. Are you talking about upasama? This is the recollection of peace, specifically the peace of nibbana, the peace of enlightenment, the peace that comes from non-attachment, the peace that comes from putting down the things of the world. That's what this refers to. It's talking about the goal of the path. It's talking about the perfect peace and total happiness of enlightenment. There's a lovely book about it called Nibbana, the Mind Stilled. It's a free book by a very famous Western monk who's been living in Sri Lanka for decades, named Bhante Jnanananda. He wrote it was a series of, I think, 25 talks about Nibbana. It was called Nibbana, the Mind Stilled. You can get it for free online. Let's see, what meditation techniques did Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Pasanno recommend? Also, what were their approaches to jhana and metta? Do you want to answer this one first, and then I'll answer?
They both recommend the breath for a simple enough reason. In both cases, that's what's worked. Ajahn Chah was reputedly so good at meditation. He had no approach to jhana. He'd simply sit down, he'd put his attention on his breath, and by the end of the first in and out breath, he'd be in jhana. So some Westerners feel that maybe he didn't talk about it much, he didn't need to. He would say, do it, and he just did it. That's what Longfor Biak said, the monk who just visited. Ajahn Pasanno, there is somewhere a retreat he did on Anapanasati, and that's the name of the collection of talks from Anapanasati. And so Anapanasati is sequential, and it heads towards the jhanas, and it also intermingles with them, depending on how you interpret it. And if you'd like to, that's probably, as far as I know, the closest he's got to talking about jhana and concentration. For the most part, he was like Ajahn Chah. What's recorded is him talking about the contemplation, the insight. As far as metta, similarly, Ajahn Pasanno also did a metta retreat. And he started out by saying this was a metta retreat for people who hate metta.
Another technique that Ajahn Pasanno recommended was the 4 elements meditation. And then once you understand the 4 elements, then the 6 elements, which is a slightly extended list of elements. Yeah, 4 elements meditation is really, really delicious. It's really, yeah, it's a great way to practice. I might talk about it on the last day of the retreat, maybe. Yeah. Next question. Bhante, what are the 4 protective meditations? Yeah, I mean, it's not a canonical list. So of course, all 4 of the meditations are found in the canon. It's just the Buddha himself never set aside that particular set of 4. So I've known a couple teachers who talk about that set of 4, but yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. There's definitely recollection of the Buddha, recollection of death, and loving kindness meditation. Those were definitely 3 of the 4. The 4th one was asubha, the unappealing nature of the body. That was the 4th one. So each one of these has a particular purpose. So meditating on the unappealing nature of the body is to overcome sensual desire. Recollecting death is to give you a sense of urgency. Recollecting the Buddha is to bring up a sense of joy, and also to remind you that enlightenment is possible, that you can attain enlightenment. What was the other one? Oh, loving kindness meditation. That's to overcome aversion, hostility. So loving kindness and unappealing nature of the body, those overcome sensual desire and aversion respectively. And then death to keep you focused and trying hard, and then the Buddha to keep you happy and to remind you that what you're working for is possible. Next question. Can you explain how to incorporate each of the 6 recollections into our practice off the cushion? So the 6 recollections are recollection of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, one's own virtue, one's own generosity, and recollection of the devas, of the divine beings, heavenly beings. So recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So recollection of the Buddha, again, it's recollecting that, first off, there was a being who attained enlightenment of his own accord, through his own effort, without being taught how. So it's the recollection that enlightenment is possible. So it was possible for someone who was not given any instructions. So it's definitely possible for us who have such clear instructions available. Recollection of the Dhamma, so bringing to mind the teachings. First off, remembering that we actually do have clear instructions on how to attain enlightenment. But then remembering exactly what those teachings are, so contemplating the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. Recollection of the Sangha. So this is both, in its more high sense, it's the enlightened Sangha, a community of people who have attained enlightenment. So that's also reminding you that enlightenment is possible. But it's also Sangha in terms of the community of fellow practitioners which help support you. So it's remembering that unlike the historical Buddha, you don't have to go at it by yourself. You have support. So right here we've got roughly 20 people together supporting each other in their practice. That's a really lovely thing. Recollection of your own generosity and your own virtue. So this depends upon you actually being generous and virtuous, which I hope we all are. If you're not, I recommend starting, because then you can actually use these recollections. So recollecting your own good deeds, that brings a lot of joy to the mind. And also it helps keep you strong in your commitment to virtuous conduct. And recollection of the devas. So this one is interesting. And so the way that Buddha recommends this is, so bringing to mind that there are these beings who are they're more powerful than humans, they're happier than humans, they live more pleasant lives than humans, and they got to that state as a result of their development of virtue and wisdom, virtue, wisdom, and concentration. So then the Buddha says, then you reflect on yourself and you say, I have those same qualities in me. So the same qualities that led to those beings becoming devas, these wonderfully happy, divine, heavenly beings, I have the same qualities that they had in order to get in that state. So it's a way of bringing up positive self-esteem, positive self-regard. So it's kind of an extension of the recollection of one's own generosity and virtue. This is off the cushion predominantly. I mean, you can use any one of these 6 recollections as a sitting meditation technique if you like, but they actually function better as something that you bring to mind throughout the day. So just remembering throughout the day, like remembering the Buddha. Like, how cool is that? And bringing to mind principles of Dhamma, and remembering that you do have a supportive community, and remembering that you are a good person, and that when you're a good person, then that brings good results.
In monasteries, we do these recollections at least twice a day. Everybody does. It's our chanting. It's easy, it's simple, it's short. It brings all of these forth, and that's really all you need. Because the thing is, you could learn books and books about the Buddha or about the Dhamma or the Sangha or about virtue. You just have to see it, and then you know exactly what it is and what you're recollecting. So it's you keep it fresh, and then you just look for it in the world, and you'll see it.
Okay, next question. Often when I practice metta, I notice a yearning, even tight feeling of love. It doesn't quite feel like the open, warm-hearted friendliness/happiness you describe. It actually feels kind of sad sometimes. Am I doing something wrong? Yes, you are. Is what I'm doing closer to compassion or just metta that's too tight? Neither. It's craving. This is craving. This is not metta. As far as I can tell, just from what's written here anyway, this sounds more like desire coming through. So metta, there's no desire. You're not wanting anything to happen. It's just this open-hearted benevolence. The phrases we use, may everyone be happy, that kind of sounds vaguely like wanting, but it's not desire. It's just this open-hearted attitude of mind. It's just this warm-hearted attitude towards everyone without exception, including yourself. So there's no boundaries, there's no limits. So there's no yearning there. There's no wanting, there's no desire. It's just this, again, there's no words that pin it down. It's just... Y'all feel me on this? Okay. If it feels sad, that's wrong. That's not right. That's not metta. Even compassion doesn't feel sad. So if you're feeling sad when you're doing compassion meditation, then also something's a bit off. So when we recognize... So sadness is it's a negative mind state. It's an unwholesome mind state. It's not actually a good thing. It represents a subtle trace of aversion. It indicates that we're rejecting what's happening. So sadness is actually an indication that we still have some aversion issues in the mind. So compassion is recognizing the suffering of the world and wishing for beings to be free of suffering. But that doesn't involve any sadness. But if one is unfamiliar with that subtle distinction, then it's easy to fall into sadness when one does compassion meditation. So that is something to watch for. So, yeah, I mean, the world is you might say the world is a sad place, but in and of itself, it just is what it is. It's got everything imaginable. The world has everything imaginable. From the most terrible to the most sublime, it's all here. So we don't need to be sad about that. That's just the way it is. And you can't change that. You cannot change the basic nature of the universe. Sorry. It's just how it is. Those terrible things will always be part of samsara. That's just how it is. But that doesn't change our ability to cultivate compassion, to cultivate the wish for beings to be free of suffering, and to act on that wish. I mean, it's from one perspective it's futile, but it's it's still useful in that you actually can have an effect. I mean, from a conventional standpoint, you can have an effect. From an absolute standpoint, no effect. But from a conventional standpoint, you can have an effect. So since we're living in a conventional experience until we attain enlightenment, then it's worth playing by the rules of conventional reality. So within that conventional experience, yeah, you can help to alleviate suffering. From an absolute perspective, you're not making a single scrap of difference. But from a conventional perspective, you are making a difference. And this is important because it's by working within the bounds of conventional reality that we are able to attain freedom from conventional reality, that we're able to attain enlightenment. And one of the things that helps us on the path to enlightenment is the cultivation of loving kindness and compassion. So I keep coming back lately to, there's a line very early in the Diamond Sutra, one of the Prajnaparamita sutras from the Mahayana canon. I'm paraphrasing here. But it says that even if a bodhisattva leads countless beings to enlightenment, in truth, no beings attain enlightenment. No beings are saved. And so what is that pointing to there? It's pointing to this perspective from absolute reality, that actually even the idea that there are separate beings is a product of delusion. The idea that there is me, this being over here, that is saving those beings over there, that is delusion. There are no separate beings. The concept of separate beings is what's making us suffer in the first place. The concept of separate beings is a product of the fact that we're not enlightened yet. So when one attains enlightenment, there is the recognition of that delusion of separate beings. One realizes that there never were any separate beings in the first place. There never were any beings at all in the first place. There's the appearance of beings, but there are not beings. I fear I've said too much, as tends to happen when I start talking about absolute reality. So anyway, yeah, compassion is good. Helps you attain enlightenment. Keep going with that. Any comments?
Yeah?
Yes.
So good. Just on a practice level, with metta, with compassion, with mudita, sympathetic joy, with equanimity. They have, each state has what's called a near enemy. It's sort of when you begin, when you actually decide to start practicing metta, to start practicing compassion, you'll start to get a sense of what is not metta, what is not compassion. With metta, it's attachment. Attachment is not metta. With compassion, it's pity. So this could be what the sadness is pointing to. Oh, may they not suffer. That's not compassion. That's not realistic. May they be free of their suffering. May they see it. May they understand it. May they be liberated from it. Not, oh, no, poor thing. That's not compassion. And this is a near enemy. So on the practice level, this may be one of the first times that you're actually turning into metta or turning into compassion, and so you'll start to see this plethora of mind states that you've been nurturing. But to be really clear, metta is not these things that you'll start to see. So keep your attention, keep your intention around metta, on real goodwill. And let these things subside. Let them fall away. Don't believe them. If things are coming up like guilt or sadness or any of these things, don't start running with them. Just let them subside and keep to your intention of goodwill, of compassion, of sympathetic joy.
I'm glad you're here, Venerable.
That's metta.
See, next question. If I feel my mind is strained or tired after a session, does this mean I was concentrating too forcefully? Any advice on putting/fixing the mind on the object with just the right amount of forced effort? Actually, often if your mind feels strained or tired after a session, it's because you are doing a lot of unnecessary thinking, a lot of useless thinking. Concentration practice does not tire the mind. It actually rejuvenates the mind, revitalizes the mind. After a period of good, solid concentration practice, you will feel on top of the world. You'll feel really good. You'll feel fresh and clear. So if you're feeling strained and tired, it's probably because you were doing a lot of thinking and planning and worrying and daydreaming and obsessing and all kinds of other things. And that's what was making you tired. Next question. Are you making a distinction between physical pain and suffering? Does the body not create physical pain sometimes, such as pain from fire, so that we can survive? Well, still, that's just a signal. So your body is sending a signal that says damage is happening. So again, like you put your hand in the fire, your body sends a signal that says the hand is being damaged. You might want to do something about that. But you can still recognize like, oh, the hand is being damaged. I'm going to remove it from the fire so it doesn't take any further damage, without having the slightest trace of mental disturbance. So again, so the distinction I'm making here is that pain is the mental disturbance, the mental discomfort in reaction to a physical sensation. That's the distinction I'm making here. So it's just how I'm using words. You could use words differently and say that pain is the physical sensation and that then the mental discomfort is something extra. You could put it that way if you like. But I find it easier to make this clarity that the sensation itself is neutral. The sensation itself is not uncomfortable or disruptive, but rather it's our mental response to the sensation that is uncomfortable, that creates discomfort. So yeah, I mean, even an enlightened being, if something starts damaging their body, then they would be aware that damage was happening to the body, and they would probably do something to stop that damage from happening. They just wouldn't be bothered by it. They wouldn't be upset about it. If anything, they would react more appropriately, because they wouldn't be clouded by the agitation and disturbance and confusion that tends to come when we get completely wrapped up in habitual mental and emotional reactions. Do you have any comments?
Was that ultimate reality?
That was conventional reality.
On the bigger ultimate reality, it doesn't really do any good to try to parse out exactly what is dukkha, exactly what is pain, exactly what is stimulus. You're here, you have a teacher, work within the bounds he's setting, and you will get the results he's pointing to. And you can figure out how it fits into the bigger picture when you finish the retreat.
Next question. regarding techniques of primary object, hands, and focus mantra. 2 new techniques for me at one time. How are these to be combined? Is one made the primary object? Then under what circumstances does one convert to the other and back again? More beneficial to adhere to one versus using both? The primary object is your hands. If you're only going to do one of these objects, use your hand. Use your hands. The purpose of the mantra, once again, is merely to reduce or eliminate our tendency towards unnecessary thinking, towards mental chatter. So the mantra is not necessary, and in fact I was going to say tomorrow that you can stop using the mantra. Again, it's just a temporary thing that you use for a short period of time when your mind is full of a lot of chatter. So since most people's minds are full of a lot of chatter most of the time, we started off with using the mantra on the first day. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you now have official permission to stop using the mantra if you feel you don't need it anymore. But be honest with yourself. If you stop using the mantra and then you go right back into thinking about random stuff, well then it's time to bring it back. Yeah, the primary focus should be your hands. That's what's going to take you into jhana.